Sugyos topics, dinim of Ketzad Ha'isha Nitmas. How does one become a Niddah? And we vaguely went into the dinim of Archakos. We didn't really touch on it, but the main focus is going to be on Archakos. But I do want to be ma'arer on a few nekudas that is very, very important. Dvarim Ashchichim, things that are common mistakes. And the goal is they should not be common and they should not be mistakes. It should be known that this is not right and it shouldn't be a mistake in the pile. So, first of all, a few ha'aras when it comes to the Shiv Nekiyim. We know that the din is that once somebody becomes a niddah, doesn't make a difference if it was a re'iyah, it was a period, or it was a kasim, or it was a medical procedure. One has to wait 5 days, even if the bleeding stops right away. Because the 5 days is not connected to the bleeding. The 5 days has to do with Pleita Shichla Zera. If you want to know what that means, you can open up a Shulchan Aruch, Simchum Tzadik Vav. So the 5 days has to be waited, no matter what. And then on day 5, so you don't have to wait until day 6, on day 5, a hefsek tana is performed. Often a meich is done. There are many people that have a hard time because there's pain, or irritation, or makas. So if they receive the heter not to do the meich tachuk, then that's a different story. Now, what I want to be ma'arer is, often, many times people receive a heter to do less b'dikas. The hefsek tana, yom harishin v'yom hashvi. Very unfortunately, I've encountered many people that confuse the hefsek tara and day 1. What does that mean? The halacha is that one has to make the hefsek tara, and the next day begins day 1 of the Shiv Nekiyim. In order for it to be Shiv Nekiyim, there has to be a hefsek. You have to have a birur, you have to know for sure shepas akdama, and then the next day the Shiv Nekiyim begin. You'll be surprised, but many people confuse the hefsek tara with day 1. They think once they made the hefsek tara, that begins day 1. And what ends up happening, they taivel 1 day earlier from Islam. Sorry? That's right. So, that's right. But I'll upon them, the reality is that unfortunately either people don't know how to use the online calendar or they don't use it, whatever it is, this has not happened just one time.
It's a moment to endorse that people use it.
It's his mother.
Yeah, I'm not going into...
People use
The answer is, yes, it can help a lot of people. 100%.
People should use it.
I didn't say that, I said yes, it can help a lot of people. They have, Baruch Hashem, many very good endorsements. They don't need me, Baruch Hashem. So that's a very important nekuda for the Shiv Nekiyim. Again, the hefsek tara, whenever a Rav gives a heter for Yom Harishin v'Yom Hashvi, 2 bedikas for the Shiv Nekiyim, for whatever reason it may be, you believe it or not, a lot of people not just have a physical pain to make bedikas, but it's also stressful, emotional, whatever it is. If the Rav gives a heter, it means a hefsek tara. The next day, day 1, and then on day 7, 3 bedikas in total. This is very important. Another toast, which if you know this klal, is going to prevent from the following mistake, which is that for some reason, you'll count correctly. You'll make the hefsek tara, and you'll count from the next day as day 1, but me'eza siba shatiya, you're going to think that hefsek tara was eilo lebedikas yom rishon. And then what happens? You're going to make a bedika on Yom HaShvi on the right day, but you never made a bedika on Yom HaRishon v'Yom HaShvi. And we know that these 2 bedikas are ma'akid. The bare minimum for the Shiv Nekiyim to count is the hefsek tara, Yom HaRishon, day 1 and day 7. So these 2 mistakes are common. The first one is much more common, unfortunately, but the second mistake also happens. But if you know the general rule, the bare minimum is 3 bedikas, you won't come to make either mistake. And while we're discussing this topic, many times if people are already doing less bedikas, it's because of ke'ev, of pain. So the Nedi Behuda, the Pesach Shiva brings it also. Taka writes that you should do the bare minimum, which is Hefsek Tani Yom Rishon and Yom Shvi. But today, there's different hamtzahs of how to make it easier. Often, a lot of people, they use something called a gel, a cream, whatever it is, because that way it makes the bedika, it doesn't hurt as much. Right? If somebody has dry skin, if you rub it, it hurts. If you put a cream, it moisturizes the area. When you're going to rub your hands, it's not going to hurt anymore. So it's the exact same thing. People use different things. I don't remember if I mentioned it last week, but for many, many years, many very big Rabbanim, they came out to use a KY gel to help with the bedikas. A few years ago, the same Rabbanim that came out to use a KY gel realized that it changes the color. Beinoni Ra'isi, the Rebbe Tzinidain showed us, I don't remember, did I mention last week? A red bedika, he showed it in front of us. And he took KY gel, and he put it on the actual 8 bedika in front of us. Within seconds it was brown. And the kind of brown that were matter. So that's why it's very, very important for those who are using any types of gel, oils, creams. The best thing to use is vitamin E oil. It should be applied internally around 30 minutes before the bedika. Another aid says to put it on overnight. It helps, it heals the skin. It's not just a one-time fix, but it's a very strong moisturizer, and it helps that going forward it's going to be easier to perform bedikas, and most importantly, it does not change the color. So those are two important nekudas by the Shivnei Kiyum, what's negea to men, for men to know. We'll cover just a few things on Vestis, things which are negea also for the men, even though you're not the one making the cheshbenas, or maybe if you are, but al kol panim, as we mentioned last week, the Taras Mishpach is a shutfus, it's a partnership between the husband and wife, and it's important that the husband is on the same page as his wife, being there not only to support and to make it easier, right? It's not just a one-way burden, so to speak, but it's something which is done together, and the simcha. But it's important you should be on the same page with the dinim, with the halachas. If there may be a potential mistake, you'll be able to catch it, you'll be able to, or at least you'll know to ask a shayla. So what's very, very common when it comes to Vestis is another common error, a mistake is, we know there's a chiyuv bedika on an aina, right? There's a few dinim that the person has to keep on the aina. There's a chiyuv prisha. Mikra din, the prisha, the separation is only by tashmish. The place can bring chibuk v'nishuk is tavay alav bracha, and it's a proper thing to do. But me'ikra din, the iser, it goes only on tashmish. It's a misconception. People may think that once a bedika was performed in the aina, everything is mutter. The halacha is that no, the entire aina is supposed to be kept. If it's an aina from the day, aina sayim, it starts on Neitz Chama, not alay Shachar, it starts a little bit later, from Neitz Chama until Shkia Chama, not until Tzeis, until Shkia Chama. There's a whole deal in the Chazdas. Yeah, so, and if it's aina salayla, the re'iyah, the period came by night, or the non-clean bedika was performed by night. So the night, when it comes to Dinei Vestis, starts from Shkia Sachama, not from Tzeis. Same thing until Neitz Chama. So Neitz and Shkia, those are the two main things. Anything which falls, any Aina which falls by day, there's a chiyuv of Prisha, of separating from Tashmish, whether or not the bedika was performed. Even after the bedika was performed, the entire Aina still has to be kept. Same thing is by night, so on and so forth. Another common misconception is Acher Leida, after birth, for 24 months, Me'eza Sibashatiya. It's a misconception. Some people may think that you don't have any more Einis to keep. For 24 months, even if the Re'iyah, the periods start coming back, you don't have to keep the calendar. This is also a misconception. The halacha is that one does keep an Eina. If they have a period, they keep the Eina Beinanis, they keep the Vesna Chaydesh. If they get a second period, then you'll have a Flaga also. The only difference is you're not Kaiveya Vest if it's within 24 months from childbirth. what does that mean? That means if you say Hey B'Chedesh, the 5th of the month, again 5th of the month, 5th of the month, 3 times, regularly you would have something called a Veses Kavua, which we'll leave that later. You leave it for the app. It's going to give you a notification to check it over with your Rav, and it'll tell you if it's accurate and what to keep and not to keep. But the main number that we're focusing on now is when it comes to 24 months after childbirth, the einas are kept, but they're not. They don't become a Veses Kavua. V'huadin, it's also very important to note, is if Rahman al-San, somebody has a miscarriage after 40 days. So if Chalila, somebody has a miscarriage after 40 days, and they have the same din as a Yeladas, if Yeram is parkin, there was a trauma in the body, whatever the lamdus is, and for 24 months, Chazal will mishayah that she's not going to be Kivei Vest, and therefore she cannot be Kivei Vest. Again, she keeps the einas, but there's no kviyas. It does not become a veses kavua, a fixed cycle. Yeah, that's b'chlolus, the main things which are required to know. And we'll start with our chakas. So it was asked last week if our chakas have to be kept by rabbim, even when she's a nida, not just b'meit harosa. There's the fact that there's other people there and may cause uncomfort. People are going to know where you're holding, so on and so forth. So again, just to reiterate, the halacha is yes, our chakas are kept b'rabbim no matter what. If it's a zman of our chakas are kept bein lifnei acherim. So if you have other people there, it does not change the halacha. Our chakas still have to be kept. And the eights is to make it less hard, less difficult, whatever it is to be creative. You know, think of a few things between yourselves before you go for the meal, to the su'udah, and just remember that your host is in the same parsha, just like you, and the other guests also. So, in the dinim of our chakes, it can be found in Simon Kuf Tzaddik Hey and Yeredeya. The Mechaber starts off with, there's a chiyuv frisha between the husband and wife during the times of our chakes. The times of our chakes begin from the point that she becomes a nida until she counts properly ka'alocha, the shivna kiyam, and tables in the proper mikveh. As we mentioned, that chalila, sometimes it happens, people table early. It doesn't mean that they're tahira, that she's tahira. There's dinim of what she has to do, but she'll have to table again. You have to count the shivna kiyam properly, make all the proper bedikas, and table in a kosher mikvah. From that point, there are no dinei archaka. Until then, all the dinim of archaka apply, and that is to separate from each other. And the Mechaber continues, and he says, one should not, there should not be any kalas reish, there should not be any lightheadedness. And it's pointed out, I feel a bedibur. Even if you're not doing anything, but just to speak certain things, the Shach points out, what does it mean there shouldn't be any kalas reish bedibur? It means not to speak about topics that will lead to hergel davet, that will remind you about tashmish. So again, are you allowed to make a joke? Of course you're allowed to make a joke, but there's a difference between stam, a light joke, and kalas reish. Kalas reish is, you're taking it way too far. A joke is something casual, something you would say with your friend. It's not nothing too crazy. That's fine. And adrabah, shalom bayis, it's encouraged. It's important to realize that it's true that in the times of Chazal, things were a little bit different. That when it was the times of Nida, there was Tum and Tada, it would be completely separated. But today, our kilkul, the fact that we don't have Tadas, could actually work out for us. It's a time, as we mentioned last week, to work on different aspects between the marriage, to work on other aspects. It's not just Gashmis, it's also a relationship, to speak about things that you don't usually speak about, that you don't have a chance to speak about. As long as it's done without kalas reish, there's absolutely no problem. And adrabah, it's something which is encouraged and should be done properly. The next din which is brought down is there's an isser of Haishata. Haishata, Negiya, Heshata means literally to pass one thing to the other. So passing is not allowed, and it's brought down even if it's a davar aruch, something very, very long. What's the isser of Heshata? Because maybe you're going to come to touch each other, right? But it's brought down, and these dinim we say loy plug, even if it's something which is a davar aruch, something very, very far. So, let's say you have a pole for the blinds, you want to just pass it, one may not pass directly to the hand, even though it's not shayach that you're going to come to touch each other. Nevertheless, the long object, you should put it down, and the other spouse should take it, and that's how it should be done. Zrika also is the same thing, one may not throw. Again, the same logic that we mentioned earlier, that in general, Zrika by definition, you're not going to come to touch each other because the hara, you have to throw it. You're not close enough to pass it. Nevertheless, the Rabbi writes that one may not throw to each other, as this is all included in the same chash. There is a tashbitz that writes that if one has a baby, and the baby is old enough to go by itself, so one spouse is holding the baby, and the baby on its own climbs out of the parent's hands and goes into the other one, that this would be allowed. So it's not so pashut. We have the Ramah. The Tashbitz did not go with the Ramah. By us, the halacha psuka is Keshittas Ramah. One may not be Saimach on the Skula because all the place can first of all ask on the Tashbitz. But also, if we're going to answer, if we already answered Zrika and Heshata, Davar Aruch, then for sure, if a baby is going to climb out of your hands and go into the other spouse's hands, it's for sure going to be also. It's no less than Zrika by throwing, and that the Ramah Paskins is also. So there are shmuas going around, different things which are taught about passing a baby. The reality is, most of the times, even when it's done, it's not done the way the Tashbitz said it. People take it to the next level and actually pass the baby, says atzmei, whatever they're relying on. The Tashbitz didn't even mean that. The Tashbitz meant that you're climbing out, the baby is climbing out and going into the spouse's hands. But again, the Maisa, none of it is Negeya because we do not pass like this Tashbitz. The halacha is like the Ramah, and we do not do that. Clothing, right? So we said one is there's an Isra of Negiah. That includes, it's kailol, it includes not to touch clothing when it's on her. So if she's wearing her clothing, one has to be careful. If you're sitting in a car together, you're going in a plane, whatever it is, so you're careful, of course, of Negiah, but it's important to note that this includes also not to touch her garments when she's wearing them. When she's not wearing her garments, there's no Isser to touch them. So, Allah Lamaisa, what does that mean?
Still have to do laundry.
There you go. In time on Archakas, you're not parted from laundry. So, again, Begadim, Levushim, when it's on her, one may not touch. It has to be careful not to touch, put emphasis to not do it. And again, many of these things, you can make your wife feel very uncomfortable. You move away, don't touch me. You have to be a little bit of the 50 chelak, not Chalila be pegea in her COVID. It's already bad enough, so to speak, that she may feel that it's my fault, it's a very not a geshmaka time. So the Nakuda is not to make it harder. The Nakuda is you have to follow the dinim to the very fine line. But you have to do it with seichel, not to be pegeya, not to make her feel bad. And it's something that you develop with different experiences that you have. Don't repeat the mistakes, but to learn from the mistakes of how you interact and try to build on how to avoid different maneuver at this time. Again, it's a very broad topic because every single person is different, but the Nakuda is you have to be aware about it. If you're aware about it and you actively put effort not to make this time harder, but Adram to make it easier, and the dinim shouldn't be a burden, it should be easier, the husband is an active partner, then you'll see these 12 days, 13, 14, 15 days, you can use it out in a proper way.
What about picking up the baby from the bed when she's...
Oh, very, very good. So, we'll mention another din. and picking up the baby when the baby's on the bed. So I don't remember if we mentioned last week. Included in the garments, levushim, is a blanket. When she's wearing her blanket, right? We mentioned it? No? When she's covering herself in her bed with her blanket, the blanket now has a din as her baggage, as her garment. So therefore, if you want to put something on her bed, you have to be careful not to put it on the blanket, but to put it on the actual mattress when it's not touching her. And the question was just asked, what about taking the baby from the bed? So it's the same principle. As long as the baby is not touching her blanket, her garment, it's fine. So she'll pull back the blanket a little bit. The baby's on the mattress, you can take the baby. If the baby's touching the mattress, you should arrange it that there should be no negia between them, and you can pick up the baby. Perfume. Perfume is a big topic. We just mentioned by levushim, by begadim, garments, that there's a difference between whether or not she's wearing them. If she's wearing them, it's a problem. One may not touch them. If she's not wearing them, it's not a problem. When it comes to perfume, it's a different din. Whether or not she's wearing the perfume, whether or not she's not wearing the perfume, the halacha is, the Pesach Shuvah brings, that one may not smell her perfume during this time. Often, many shalos come in, it's during the time of Rachakas, am I allowed to wear my perfume? So, some place can bring that you can put a very small amount, whatever is needed, to be mechasa, to cover over, to serve as a surveyna, so to speak. Not to overdo it, not that you don't, the smell isn't espashit so much that your husband has to stay away, but just enough to serve its bare minimum purpose. Okay.
What about men's cologne?
That's fine. That's fine. When you're eating, right? Everyone knows there's a din, you have to have a heker. There's one more place in Yeridea, which is brought down, that a heker is required by eating, in Simon Peites, Bas B'chalav, the Shach. It's a whole deal on if it's by Sharis also, or just Bas B'chalav, Chametz. Leave that on the side. But there's a dinei heker. Why do you need a heker? Because achila brings kiruv, right? When it comes to bas b'cholov, you need a heker to remind you not to eat. You're having fleishiks, she's having milchiks, not to eat from each other's food. And when it comes to the zman of archakas, at the time of nida, you need a heker to remind you, that even though we're doing a ma'aser which brings kiruv, you eat together. But nevertheless, there's a heker reminding you that it's still the time of nida and you have to act accordingly. So the requirement for a heker is bein if they rabin, the same thing as we mentioned last time. If you're eating in public, you still need to have a heker, and this is tricky a little bit. Yes, it is tricky how to do it without other people noticing. We'll give a few possible dogmois of how you can do it, but let's first start with what's required in your own home. So the place of the heker has to be between your plates. So that doesn't mean that you take your shoe, you put it, so chas v'shalom, you shouldn't touch each other. But the malkim of the heker has to be between the two plates, has to be not just, you're eating here, you put something all the way there, that does not help you. It's not a heker, you're not going to, it doesn't serve to remind you anything. It should be something in between the two plates, and it has to be gavaya ktsas, it has to be a little bit elevated, because if it's just flat, it's not going to remind you anything, right? The nukuda is, the purpose of the heker is to remind you that now is the days of nida. Oh, we'll see in a second.
Huh?
It's miyuchad.
That's you don't sit next to her, it's not a bit, you don't.
Oh, so... Sounds we'll see. Separate tables is fine.
No, I'm saying for different ends of the table, just leave a hecker. What?
Allah l'maisi, yeah.
How does it make sense? How do you
Table this long.
With other people sitting.
We'll get there in a second. It's it's a big discussion. There's a big siddur time on this. There's a Rosh, there's a Machlokes Rishonim, Shulchanos Gedolos, Ketanim. L'halacha, we don't pass him like the Rosh. L'halacha, we pass him that even if it's a big table, one still has to have a heker, and we'll see in a second.
What's Gvei K'tas?
Oh, very good. What's Gvei K'tas? Gvei K'tas means Gvei K'tas. There's no...
The self-in Gvei K'tas?
No. So Gvei K'tas, the reality is, in the Paiskim, it actually does not give a shiur. There's no actual measurement which is given in the Paiskim. It's Gvei K'tas, that something which is common sense, that you're going to realize that this is there. Some Paiskim bring, it's not so common in America, but you have an ashtray. Used to be people smoked. Today, I don't know, maybe people smoke still, but it's not so common. So you had an ashtray, and you would, whatever. So some place can write that an ashtray is good, but we'll see in a second. Tonight, we'll get it. But we see at least we see from here that the shear, the height is not so high, but it's there. It's noticeable.
That's it. 2 cell phones.
Yeah,
Size of
actually,
key.
actually, there was size of a cell phone. It was a small thing.
Ashtrays is this big.
Yeah.
This big as an ashtray.
So big tonight, when it comes to a heker, it has to be something which is not the derech that it's there during this time. What does that mean? Lamaisa means that anything which is regularly on the table, something which belongs on the table, does not serve as a heker, and it's very well understood. Why? Because it's not going to remind you of anything. It's there anyways. A very good example which is brought in the Shulchan Aruch is if you're eating challah. So challah is gevaya k'tzas. If you're eating from it, it doesn't serve as a heker. Why not? Because you're eating it from it, it belongs on the table anyways. It belongs there. It has a purpose, and you're eating it. If you're not eating from the challah, you specifically designated the challah to be put in between you, so it does not belong over there. Usually, if food is on the table, it's designated to be eaten. If you're not eating it, that means it's ein darken liyasham. It doesn't belong over there. Similarly,
If you have a bunch of bokel out there, you can put one bokel down even though you
Yes.
have other ones.
yes,
But isn't it part
you're
of
not
the same
touching it. So
one?
both of you know this one you're not eating, you're not touching it. It's just there. Yes, it works. Similarly, another example which is brought in the Shulchan Aruch is if you have a specific jug, which is miyuchad, you separate it special for the time of our chokes. The chiddush over here is even if you're drinking from it. Even if you're going to serve from this jug, as long as it comes back in between you, the halacha is it could be used. A very, very practical eitzah is you have napkin holders. It for sure fits the criteria of Gevaya K'tzas. And if you're miyached one, you set one aside to use dafka during the time of Rakakis, and you keep it in between both plates. That's the best. It's the easiest. It doesn't scream, oh, I'm a heker. It belongs kiviyachal on the table. However, it's never on the table except for the time of Rakakis, and that itself works. Another good example, what you can use is a mappa. If you don't use a mappa generally, a placemat, you usually don't eat with one, but during the time of Rechokes, you put a placemat. This also helps.
What about a charger?
It's correct, sense.
Huh? No, a charger.
No, the same thing. A
Not
charger,
a
same
phone
thing as a
charger.
placemat.
Not a phone charger.
A
A
charger,
big plate, you put your plate on. Fancy big plate.
same thing as a plate. It's the same
It's
thing
the
as a
same, it's the same
map.
equivalent. You're not eating from it.
Your listening used to tell us all this. You take the kiveya that your becher is only on the table we may chakis, and not to use it. Or kiveya k'tzas or a salt shaker.
Because if you're eating at someone's house, the best
So,
is only
Right.
option.
A charger,
That's
this
right.
is
A becher is the easiest because even when you're eating out, you just kiveya, I'm not taking it off the table. And nobody's using it. But tonight I'm
correct. A charger, so I just learned something new. You have a big plate. Under your plate is the same din as a mappa, as a placemat. So again, if it's you usually don't eat with it, and now punk this meal you are going to eat with it, and you're both conscious, you're both aware about it. That also helps to be a hacker. We started going into the topic of a becher, and any. Yeah, this is the best eitzah. If you're eating by somebody's house, not to make it so obvious, you put a napkin, whatever. It's not You put a napkin, it's visible, you spread it out, you put your plate on top of it. There, you're eating b'mapa shaloi, she's b'mapa shaloi, and nobody, if you don't usually do that, that actually does work.
Both of them have to have a mappa or only one?
Not that, no. B'mapa shaloi, then that's fine. So whoever wants to do it, can do it. And I'll just tell you a story by my Shabbat Brachas. One of our Shabbat Brachas was by a Rav's house. And by my plate, I found a white, it wasn't a disposable napkin, but it was a, so he put it, whatever, he's a Talmid Chacham, obviously, so he saved us the work. Okay, so back to Becher and anything else. So there's also another din that if something has a specific spot on the table, this is always in the center of the table. It doesn't move. That's where it belongs. When you set the table, that's where it is. If you move it from its makom kavua, from where it always is, and you put it in between you, that also works. It's also a shinoi that works for a hacker. Why? Because it doesn't belong there usually. The fact that you're going to look and say, oh wow, my shna, what happened? Oh, it's going to come to remind you that yes, it's here for the purpose of a hacker. So it's the same thing. A salt shaker, the same thing. If the salt shaker has a special place on the table, it's always by the challah. Now you're moving, even if it's the same salt shaker, but you're moving it from its kvius, from where it always is, and you're putting it in between you, that also helps. The same thing is when it comes to a becher, something which is never put in between you, but now you're miyachid, you're taking away from its makom kavua, wherever it sits, or b'chlal, some people take off the becher right away from after kiddush, they wash it out, and now your keveya, this is the new place, even if it's the same becher, that's a kiddush, then it also serves as a heker. Now, to answer the question that was...
You can't drink it.
No, you can't drink it.
Even if you never have a becher.
To answer the question that was asked, does it apply by a large table? The answer is yes. The lamdas behind it, we can speak after the shiur. It's a big topic, it's a very, very big topic, but halach lamaisa, the answer is yes, it still does apply. Even if you don't sit next to each other, correct. Even if you're here and she's there, we say by plug. The logic behind it, we'll speak after.
What if your wife's makom is next to you, but then you move the makom?
So I'll tell you, there's a Piskei Dinim from Tzemach Tzedek that writes that the meaning is of Nasai Mechanet. There is such a shitta. It's not, it's a very good ha'ara. But the Piskei Dinim writes that the meaning is Nasai Mechanet. What?
There's people in between you and her.
Same thing. White plug.
If you have no becher, so if she stops eating, you could eat, and then take
She's sitting on the
turns.
table?
You're sitting by the table together.
No, that's
You couldn't figure out anything to make it happen.
You can't crump up a napkin, make it in a ball.
you could if it's Gevayik Tzas, and you usually don't do it. Meaning a napkin is always beside you, and if it's crumbled up, it's beside you. If you're now moving it,
They take it as much
Between
time
you.
to take one from the middle, makeshift.
if you never do it, yes. The nukuda is, it has to be a shimmer, something that's never done, and you both have to be aware about it. One, there's another din, that's by the dinim of heker. Now, there's another halacha of achila mekaira achas, eating from one plate. Obviously, one may not eat from the same plate together. If you have a serving plate, right, the taz, so that's easy. You take from the plate, you put it into your plate. There's a hefsek between your taking from that plate. You first put it into your plate, and then you eat from your plate. That's allowed. The same thing is when it comes to small snacks, whatever it is, you're not allowed to eat from the same bag. You have to first take, put it into your napkin, into your own plate, whatever you have, and then you can eat from it. But one may not eat from the same plate. Oh, another nukot I want to bring is about when it comes to a car, if you're driving together, you're in the passenger seat, she's driving, or you're driving, she's in the passenger seat, whatever it is, and you're eating something, so you're not eating the same snack, but the halacha is you don't need a heker. You don't need a heker. Shuvas B'Tzel Chachma, the David Tzinarov's brother, he has a tshuva explaining the kiruv adas is davka by when you're eating by a shulchan, by a table. When you're eating together, even if it's just a snack, there is kiruv. When you're driving, you're not even facing each other. You're just, whatever it is, that, you don't need a hecker, yeah?
Only by a table.
It's only by a table, yes.
So if you're eating not by a table, you don't have to do it.
By a car. The example is brought by a car.
We must be like a picnic. We must be like a
A
picnic.
picnic is a little bit different. A picnic is
Family outing.
a picnic and a family outing. All of these things that would be different, because ultimately you're sitting together by one. Even if it's not a physical table, but you're eating on one
Table.
tablecloth, and you're eating together on one setting. By a table, so even though you don't have a physical table, but then ultimately you're eating together, so just because you're missing a table, it doesn't take away that you're eating a sa'udah together, you're having a snack together. By shaking by a car, there's nothing connecting you. You're facing your way, she's facing her way. Just because you're putting it down on that place in between you, that does not make your sa'udah or your snack as one.
So can you eat from the same bag of chips?
No, very good question. So even though you don't need a hacker, but the halacha of not eating from kaida achas, not eating from one plate or one bag of chips, still applies.
You're allowed to, if she drinks from a bottle, could you take afterwards and tub
Oh,
up?
very good. Shirai, we're going to get to them in a second. Very good, Shaila. Very, very good. So a very, very good question was just brought up. Leftovers.
What's the whole reason of that?
To remind you,
To mind you that way.
not to bring to Hag. Achila is something that brings to Kiruv. Right? You go out to a restaurant, it's something, sorry? Go out with kids?
Shmuley, go for it.
Yeah, aren't the kids sitting, other people sitting by the table and sitting the hecker?
So the answer is no. You actually have to have something on the table reminding you, because even if you have a lot of people by the table, the halacha is it's loy plug. The lums behind it, as I mentioned before, we can speak about it. It's Rishonim, it's Achreinim, it's Siddhataras explaining why. It's a very, very good question. Ba'araya, it's addressed. But in short, halacha l'maisa, even if you have other people by the table, you have your kids, whatever it is, a hacker is still required. Back to
Leftovers.
Shirayim, back to leftovers. So we know that the husband may not eat the leftovers of his wife, but the wife is allowed to eat the leftovers of her husband. So what does that mean? If somebody sat down to eat something, the wife sat down to eat something, she sat down to drink something, she had her coffee, she had a few sips, she had her eggs, whatever she was eating, the husband is not allowed to eat her leftovers.
Did you say after the kid that you're allowed to put it in a different thing?
The exception to this rule is if you took the food and you put it in another utensil, another keli, then you're allowed to eat from the food. So again, if your wife ate eggs, whatever it is, and you want to have the leftovers, so one may not eat directly from her plate. So what could be done is you transfer her food onto your plate and then you're allowed to eat it. And the same halacha is if she leaves the room, then you're allowed to eat it. So again, if you
Finished, can you just take her plate?
you should transfer it from her plate to yours. Yeah, so you transfer the same thing. Even if she says, I don't want it anymore, but ultimately she ate from it. So it has a din of her leftovers, so you have to transfer it from her plate to your plate.
Same thing by liquid?
Same thing by liquid. If she left, she was drinking her water, her seltzer, her coffee, whatever it is. So even she said, I'm finished, I don't want it anymore, the halacha is one may not drink straight from her cup. Even if she says, I'm not going to drink anymore, rather you take from her cup, you pour it back into your cup, and you may drink. We also mentioned last time that it doesn't help, let's say she finished, the cup was this full, she finished only this much, it doesn't help to fill it back to the top and drink it. Because ultimately her leftovers were there, so you have to spill out from her cup into your cup and then one may drink. The same is true, if she leaves the room, you're allowed to drink it. And even if she walks back in the middle of when you're eating her leftovers, you're allowed to finish. So you started eating her leftovers when she left. She came back in the middle, the halacha is you're allowed to finish. Yeah, when she left, yeah.
How come the Gabi Pagum is considered that you're changing wine? You can for Kiddush, why not? If you add more wine.
It's a different dinner. No. The Nukudah is over here. It shouldn't be considered her leftovers. If she drank from it and there's still leftovers from her left, so adding to it, it's still her cup, it's still her leftovers. You add it to her leftovers. It doesn't take away the status of her leftovers.
But by Kiddush, it changes the status.
Can Kiddush, yeah, because it's a din of pogum.
So when she leaves the room, you can eat from her plate?
Sorry? Yeah, when she leaves, you could eat from her plate, yes. And more than that, if she comes back in the middle, the halacha is you're allowed to finish what you started. We're not mechayiv you to... Another interesting halacha is, if you started eating her leftovers when she was still tahira, and in the middle of the Sauda, she realized that the flow came, she's not mechayiv to tell the husband to stop eating, he's allowed to finish what he's eating, and we're not, you don't have to stop. Another exclusion to this rule is if she drank from a kais and the husband didn't know about it. So when he's drinking now this kais, this cup, he does not know that it's her shirayim. She doesn't have a chiyuv, she doesn't have an obligation to tell the husband that this is her leftovers. He's allowed to finish it, she doesn't have to say anything. As we mentioned last week, there's also a din of one is not allowed to send a glass of wine to his wife.
Wine or Kiddush?
Wine, any wine. It's a good question, is it wine or any kiddush? This halach applies to any wine. And the Piskei Dinim, Tzemach Tzedek, writes also, din when it comes to shar mashkin, when it comes to any chashav mashkin, shar mashkin chashuvin, I should say, any chashav mashkin, any fancy drink that you would go to a special place to buy it, you know better than I do what these drinks are. What? Cocktail.
Where's beer?
Beer's not chashuv. No. Cocktail, grape juice is different.
Yours to Marmadina.
I know.
It's a ram.
I know.
It's a chashva drink, but it's a drink that would bring you to Paradise, right?
Marmadina doesn't mean
It's not about chashva.
mashkin chashuv.
It's a ram.
It's about the shivas of the drink, or it's about the effect of the drink?
Chashuv's of the drink. It's a very good question. It has to be a chashuv drink. If it's the instant coffee,
No, but if it's a latte, you pour your wife the milkshake or whatever.
yeah, if it's chashuv, yeah, sure. Mashkin chashuv is something that you buy special. Instant coffee, you can also the measure it's milk also. It's two different things. No? The measure milk.
Like coffee powder, right?
That's the reason. Yeah. So again, so the Isser is one is not allowed to send or to give his drink. So that means even if you ask somebody else, Ali de Shliach, you ask your children to bring the Kiddush, or you ask a guest, please pass this to the Rebbitzin, one is not allowed to do that. What they could do is, I think that this we mentioned last week, is you put the becher down, she comes and she takes it, you're not sending it. Another eitzah is, you're not designating anything, you're pouring into a bunch of cups and everyone comes and takes. There's no designation, there's no shlicha, you're not sending anything, that also works. This din...
Why can't you pass it? Why can't you send it through a shliach?
That's including sending, because you're not allowed to send a kaish liyayin or a mashkin chashuvim.
That's only by mashkin, not by food?
Correct. This is special.
Why?
Why is it only by mashkin, not by food?
It's a special din that we find only by mashkin. And it's not only that. And then the other exception to this rule is that not only is it just by mashkin chashuvin and not by food, but it's only from husband to wife. The wife is allowed to send to the husband. It's a din on the husband that he is not allowed to send it. The wife is allowed to send it. Oh, we'll see in a second. Adel shows a different din. Very good. Okay, you know what? We'll go to that right now. Serving food is a very, very good question. When it comes to serving food, there's no chumrah of wine or other foods. But we know that there's 3 malachas that the wife does for the husband, and one of them is she serves the food. So during the time of Archakos, this is one of the things that is not allowed to be done.
I'm not getting up, you're going to play.
Chas v'shalom, right? So the answer, how do you do it? What's the right way to do it? Is if it's put down with a shinoi. What's brought down is if you're writing and you always give with the right hand, you give it with the left hand. Or another example is you don't put it directly by where you're eating, you put it a little bit further away, and the husband brings it closer to himself. With these ways, it is allowed. It applies to drinks and foods equally, except for water. Water is there's nothing to it, so then you're allowed to give it directly, not into the hand, but where they're eating. And some places can extend it to a unflavored seltzer. It's the same thing as water. You're allowed to put it directly there without a shinoi. During the time of Archakos, there's another din that you're not allowed to sit on her bed. So this includes whether or not she's there. She could be in the same room, she could be not in the same room, she could have left, she's not in town.
What if she goes upstairs in the summer for 2 months and her bed is not
You're stuck.
What makes it her bed? You can decide that that's your bed now.
Oh, very good. Very, very good. We're going to see that in a second. The lashon is mitam yuchedes law. Once it becomes her bed, that she slept in it, once she slept in it, it was designated as her bed. I didn't say last week. I gave another chabur, maybe I spoke of it. I'll give you an example of a Ma'aser Shahaya. A few weeks ago, somebody called and asked that the Yemei Tarasa, he by accident fell asleep by accident, whatever it is, as a fluke, he fell asleep in her bed. So she decided that she's not going to wake him up. She'll go to sleep in his bed. The next day, she became a niddah. Does her bed now become his bed? Or his original bed is still his bed? The answer is, they were never kaveya that were switching. It was a yetzadefin, so to speak. It was a fluke that I fell asleep on your bed. We never changed, we never made up that we're switching beds. It's still your bed, and I fell asleep in it at the time that I was allowed to. So that doesn't change. You're still allowed to go sleep in your own
Even
bed.
if this dam came onto your bed?
Taz.
What?
It's a taz. It's a shibush godel to stay away from the dam. That doesn't change anything.
If there's blood comes onto your bed,
It doesn't make any difference. So again, you have a bed which is designated to be your wife's, and you have a bed which is designated to be yours. You can only switch b'yemei tarasa. So if she goes upstate, you have to time it in a way that it's not in the time of Archakos, so you actually switch beds, and you sleep in her bed b'yemei tarasa, and then once you designated it and you slept in it, that becomes your bed. An example we brought earlier, there was a one-time fluke, so to speak, that he just fell asleep in her bed and she fell asleep in his bed. That does not change whose bed it belongs to.
What about if you only have one bed and a roll over?
You sleep on the floor.
No, I'm saying some homes have a king size bed with a rollaway bed for 2 weeks. And then we went to the country, like David said.
The what, sorry?
And in a home that had one large bed and one rollaway bed. Right? And the wife went to the country for the summer. He has to still sleep on the rollaway bed?
Same halacha. And I'll tell you a secret. There's a takana from Alter Rebbe to have the same size beds to avoid this issue.
Have 2 beds.
There's 3 takanas that we find from the Alter Rebbe. Chalafim, a chalaf which is malutash, which is how do you say it? Sharp on both sides. It was sharpened by both ends. There's 2 ways of doing it. You can sharpen it from one end. Now, one of the 3 takanos of Alter Rebbe was to sharpen it on both ends. It should slice. It's more mahuda that way, less shayla of chash to become correct. Yeah. The next thing is to have a hot mikvah, which is a big chiddush. Huh? It's a very big chiddush. To have a hot mikvah, this.
For women.
No.
In those days, the women used to be turned into the rivers.
The second takana of Alter Rebbe was to have a hot mikvah, Even though there may be a shayla, mishum mechatzos, whatever it is, but you have to realize if a mikveh is cold, if a lady is not going to want a toivel because it's a freezing mikveh, especially in Russia, the whole thing is not worth it, so to speak. So the Alter Rebbe's takana was to have davka hot mikveh. What?
Don't say it's not worth it.
Correct.
Little secrets in there.
Simon could say it's a big kiddush for some. Very big kiddush.
The Malachers do bring this.
I know.
So you can't just.
The Taz brings it.
Right? You can't just.
Yeah, but that's for his wife, not for kiddush.
Okay, but we're talking about a bit the Yevet.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, there was a bit the Yevet.
You know what?
Takana?
Okay, should we bring it? Okay.
No,
The third
go
takana was mitzvah zechayiv is to have the same size beds. That it shouldn't be that in the time of tahara that you're sleeping together, but even b'mei tahara, each one has their own beds. I'm telling you that the takana Alter Rebbe was. You can apply it in your day-to-day life. You can speak about Moshe after. But I'll call upon him. Back to our discussion. That once a bed is miyuchad for her, you may not sleep on it, you may not even sit on it, even if she's not there, during the time of Archakis. Now, there's an exception to this rule.
Get one clarification on it. That means even if you change the linen, right?
Even if you change the linen, very good question. Yeah, that's a very, very good question. Even if you change the linen, the bed is her bed. The linen is just covering over her bed. So it's the same thing. You're getting a big trouble, it's recorded. Send it to his wife after. There's an exception to this rule. She is allowed to lay down in his bed shaloi b'fanav. The Taz is very, very vague when it comes to this din. From the Pashta Mashmaz of the Taz, one may think that one is not allowed to sleep, or to lay, that she is not allowed to sleep in his bed shaloi b'fanav, but the Piskei Tshuva brings Pshat in the Taz. One of the Pshatim he gives that shaloi b'fanav, when he's not there, the wife is allowed to sleep in the husband's bed, to lay down in the husband's bed.
So
Again,
if you walk
shaloi
to the room, she has to stand
b'fanav.
up?
Sorry?
So if you walk to the room, she has to stand up?
Yeah, sure.
And if she's sleeping, he has to wake her up.
Don't walk in. Let her stand.
He didn't know. He walked in.
Why is it always worked in the wife's favor?
Because the husband is a big ball fight.
Like about that?
Yeah.
These days, even these days?
What do you mean even? Especially these days.
Especially these days, the husband's always a big about that.
I'm not saying, look at the Shulchan Aruch, you'll see. When he's a chayla, it's much more kal than when she's a chayla.
It could have
When
been
she's
that,
a
it could
chayla,
have been
much
it
more
back in the day. It could have been this back in the day, but now they don't have the same mitzvah.
Anything is much stronger. Much stronger. What do I want to say? A safsal misnadned, a chair, a couch, whatever it is, something that you sit down and you feel each other's movement, that one is not allowed to sit on during the time of our chalkes, unless there's somebody sitting between you. That Rama brings that if somebody is sitting between you, so you have something that shakes, a rocking chair, whatever it is, or you feel each other's movement, one is not allowed to sit together. The exception is if somebody is sitting in between you, the Rama brings, this is allowed. Then the Rama continues.
Even your own child?
Yeah, as long as they have to, the person of the din of tiyul, going on a trip. This din, you should know, was taken so out of context, you have no idea. It starts with the Tumas Hadeshim. The Tumas Hadeshim is somebody Shainim. He brings as a chidush din that one should not go in a agola or a sfina or in a boat, a carriage and a boat together for the purpose of l'tayil, beganim, or l'pardesim. Not to go for the purpose of sightseeing. You should not go in a boat together, or in a car ride together, or in a carriage together, if the actual purpose is l'shem tiyul, l'shem sightseeing, l'shem enjoyment.
This is something, if you go into a hotel, there's one bed in a hotel during
Sit on the floor,
Achakos.
on the couch.
And there's no couch?
You
got a floor? A floor?
If it's a normal hotel, you can ask them to give you something.
Well, you never slept on the floor.
That's what I whatever.
Bach, you never slept on the floor.
What happens if you planned a vacation before? And
Oh, this is what I want to speak about. This din was taken so out of context. For some reason, it became the vacations are also, this is also, that's also. If you look in the Makar of the Din, if you look in the Ramah, it's not talking about you're not allowed to go on vacation. There's a specific din, one is not allowed to go on a tiyul, in a car, in a carriage, in a boat, together. To go on a vacation, to travel, to go to a vacation, as long as you're keeping the regular achokes, there's no problem. Yeah, I'm asking. Sure.
So what's the difference between a vacation and a trip?
A trip means that this trip itself is for the purpose.
You mean the actual movement?
The actual ride that we're going on, this ride itself is l'shem, l'tayel, beganim, u'padesim. If you're going on a trip to the country together to spend Shabbos and it's just you two, or you're going even for a week, whatever it is, that's not the din, that's not the isra of tiyul. That's not the isra of what the Ramah is discussing. As long as the proper chalkas are kept, if you're eating together, you have a hecker, each one has their own bed.
So what's the isser? What is the isser?
Isser is only to go in a carriage, in a car.
Can you give an example of what the isser is?
Yes, you're not allowed to go into a safari together.
To a
In a car,
safari?
yes, you can't go to a safari.
But to
in a
go
car.
to Miami on a beach weekend is okay. Where's the line?
The line is
what
drawn-
is okay, what's not okay? I'm asking seriously.
There's no isser to go on a vacation, and as long as all of our chalkas are kept properly. The din of traveling together is only for the purpose of the ride itself is for enjoyment. I'm going now for a ride through Manhattan for sightseeing because it's a beautiful sight with all the nice buildings. It's just me and my wife, and that's the purpose of our trip.
Carriage ride in Central Park.
Carriage, same thing. The carriage ride in Central Park.
What's the issue with
Carriage
that?
ride is even more problem.
No, the,
It's still some
How about walking to a park?
Very good. Going for a walk is mutter. Believe it or not,
The Losh is I'll begin with the gradation.
what was not for BSF,
No,
what
no,
for
no,
walk is
no.
for the person
this din is built off a safsel hamisnadmate. The din that we brought earlier, that you can't sit on the safsel together, this din is built off of that. To go for a walk together is not also. There is an Aruch HaShulchan that brings that the machmet of bracha, but it's not me'ikar din. If you look in the Rishonim, if you look in the market of the din, the way that the Ramah brings it, it has no shaykhs, no connection to walking. If there are Rabbanim who are machmet with the Aruch HaShulchan not to go for a walk, they have the Aruch HaShulchan to be semichan. However, it doesn't say not to walk.
So if on your vacation you went to Miami, you had a boat ride planned, you have to cancel it.
Yes. Yeah. That's a perfect application of this din.
Right, you can't go on
We're
a
going to
boat.
say it over that to go on an actual vacation,
go fishing, yeah.
there's no problem.
Water.
There's no problem to go on the vacation.
One second, fix what address what Neil said at the same time. Neil saying be mechalik between when you're going on the boat as sightseeing versus when you're going on the boat for fishing.
So boat,
You go on Staten Island ferry, you see the Statue of Liberty?
it would be the same thing.
No.
Same thing.
No, what is it? That's a destination.
You go to the
The
actual
ride
Statue
is
of
not the
Liberty.
point. The point is the destination. Over here,
How does it work? What do you do?
It's a ride activity.
You get it's a ferry to go somewhere, or you're staying there,
No, where's the Staten Island?
and you go off there. That's allowed. Oh, very good. If you're staying on the ferry, if you're not using it as a means to get to your destination, it's allowed. If you're using it as a means to get to where you have to go, you're taking a ferry to go somewhere, that's mutter. But if you're going on the ferry, the enjoyment of going on
It
the
also only
ferry,
applies when it's just you and your wife. If you have your kids with you, it's not a problem.
yeah, that's my
That's what he's saying. It's a ferry, which is a ferry is a
A lot of people.
sacrament.
So, yeah. So the explanation is made that there's other people there.
It's only you and your wife.
Different between cars and everything. So it wouldn't be like that.
Only someone driving the boat.
Why you hold different? You're saying
I want to get back to this because that was brought up. This is a perfect application of this din. That when you're going on a vacation, there's no problem on the actual vacation itself. On the vacation, one may not go on a ferry, the ferry, and you're not going anywhere. So this is a misconception. That's the answer. The vacation, there's no isser in the vacation. The isser is once you're on vacation, you can do things that even when you're home. It's the same dinim of archakis when you're home, and the same dinim of archakis when you're on vacation. The ferry. So again, if you're going on a destination to go somewhere, it's mutter. If you're going for the sake of sightseeing the beautiful lake and the Statue of Liberty, that's a problem. If you're going just for the sake of the boat ride to sea, that's a problem.
Two separate ferries, right?
If you take two separate ferries, you should do something. You should use it as a. You should get off and do something there. Not just to stay on the ferry, but to actually go do something there, and then it's allowed.
Shopping, go shopping, right?
Go shopping, yeah, it's a destination. You're going somewhere. Okay, whatever. Yeah. Good.
Yeah.